You are listening to the Unleashed and Aligned podcast, where we strip away the noise, unleash our truth, and align with our highest self. I'm your host, Coach Felicia, a life coach, energy guide, and your biggest believer. Now let's dive into today's episode. Hello and welcome to the Unleashed and Aligned podcast. I am here with Alison Hayes. Alison is a powerful voice for the disability community, blending lived experience with deep expertise to helping others navigate the often overwhelming systems we rely on, like social security, healthcare, and disability support. As a disability coach, Alison empowers her clients to understand their rights, access the resources they need, and advocate for themselves confidently and effectively. She's the author of 2 books of Thriving While Disabled. Her work is rooted in real-life experience, driven by compassion, and focused on helping others reclaim their independence and agency. Whether you're just starting your disability journey or supporting someone who is, Alison's work is a game changer. She is a disability coach, author, and advocate. Welcome to the podcast, Alison.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you today. And before we get started, I just want to go over, how do you identify within the LGBTQ community, and if there's any specific labels and what pronouns that you use?
Okay. I use she, her pronouns, and I am part of the bi community.
Okay. And what does being part of that community really mean to you? And if there's anything that you want to touch on within that specific label.
So basically, the bi plus community is all of the people in between the worlds, the identities of homosexual and heterosexual. The reason I'm saying bi and bi plus rather than bisexual is because there's been too much of a focus on sex and sexuality, especially for the bi community, because very often we are dealing with stereotypes like anything that moves. In fact, there is a zine with that title that was a response to those kinds of stereotypes. So for the bi community, we're capable of attraction to any gender. And bi is the older term. The best way to understand it is the original terminology was used as bi, meaning attracted to both men and women. But with the modern understanding of gender, it's really better to think about it as attraction to your own gender and other genders, just because there's been so many stereotypes. Also, people within the bi community can have sexual, romantic, and or platonic, sexual and romantic feelings towards anyone of any gender to any degree at any time. So it's a very broad definition, and actually a very large percentage of bi people end up in what appear to be heterosexual relationships simply because of numbers. When you think about it, a small percentage of the global population has same-sex attraction. And so for people who are attracted to any gender, it's much easier to find a partner of a different gender as to a partner of the same gender. So a lot of bi people end up in relationships that to the outside observer might appear to be heterosexual, even though, and honestly, even bi people in same-sex relationships end up being mistaken for a gay couple.
Yeah, I can see that.
So being bisexual, we deal with a lot of being perceived as something we're not.
Yeah.
I've been with my partner for almost 15 years now, and people see me with him and assume we're a straight couple.
Yeah.
I was dating a woman, they'd see me with her and assume we're lesbians. And so for bi people, we're constantly struggling to be recognized by people at all as an identity, because all too often we're either erased or assumed to be something else. So bi people very often find themselves coming out all the time.
That's the thing. Yeah, you're constantly
Right. No, I'm not gay. No, I'm not straight. No, I'm
right.
not. I'm bi. And people forget.
So this is like the perfect example of don't judge a book by its cover.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And like, I've realized a lot of my identities are things that can be easily missed or hidden. And the interesting thing is, research has shown that one of the biggest issues for bi people is the being out or not. And that what's been discovered is bi people's mental health has suffered even more than the general LGBT community because we're constantly being dismissed or ignored and constantly have to come out or accept people mislabeling us.
I can understand how just because we live in a world that really what is like what you assume.
Mhm.
I think that is one of the reasons why so many people need to pay attention, and myself included, because we're so conditioned to say, looking and seeing somebody and saying he or she based off of that appearance, and really understanding like what pronouns people want to be called as and adapting to that. But yeah, so I would love to dive into like your early story. Can you bring us back to like when you started figuring this out and what that was like?
So, yeah, I had, in a lot of ways, a pretty unusual experience for a few different reasons. But basically, everybody, including me, thought that I was straight until my senior year of college,
Oh, wow.
when I suddenly had a huge crush on this young woman who I met like the first week back on campus, who was actively part of the LGBT community at my
Mm.
college. It was really fast, honestly. We met at dinner time and we're tabling for various events. And we talked a little, and I'm like, this is weird. I'm like stumbling over my tongue and I'm blushing and what is going on with me as I continue to like talk with her, and just the kinds of feelings you get when you've got a major crush on somebody. And just, I'm like, I can't do anything. Why am I blushing? Why am I stammering? Why am I struggling for words? What is going on? And then I like pieced together for myself that this is how it feels when I have a crush on somebody. She's a girl. I've never had a crush on a girl before. Huh. And I went and talked, like after dinner, I actually went and talked to a few friends of mine who were part of the community. And they're all like, oh my God, Allison's thing. I'm like, what? This is a thing? And so I learned the term bi, the word bisexual. The same night I realized I had a crush on a girl, and things went amazingly smoothly because with encouragement from this group of friends, I actually went over and wrote a note on her whiteboard, because that was the thing you did in college in those days, and ended up asking her out within a week.
Wow.
And we started dating. And we were together for that term. And then we didn't break up when the school year ended, but she was going to be in school the next year. I was going off and figuring out my life. So I was like, I really care about you. I don't want us to break up because of this. But if you meet somebody else, that is fine. Just let me know. So it ended up a year or so later, she did meet somebody else, and they're happily married and raising kids together in the whole 9 yards. But
You still talk to that person?
yeah, I do.
That's so
Um,
awesome.
we're Facebook friends, and just every once in a while say hi or whatever. She's living on the other side of the country. We haven't had an in-person interaction since the year after I graduated. I went out and visited her. But yeah, we're still connected. We're still Facebook friends. We're messages every once in a while. But it was quite an experience. And I know it's unusual. Like, most people don't ask their first crush out.
Yeah.
And how likely is it that they'll say yes? I was really lucky.
I feel like that experience was really good for a couple reasons. And I think one of them was like you had obviously you were in the community, so you had friends within the community. So that was nice that you had people to go talk to and help encourage you and help you navigate that. Or if you had questions, they probably were there to ask. And then, like you said, you had the courage to go ask the person that you actually had a crush on, and they said yes. And it sounds like you guys had a great connection and it was a good relationship that, like, each person was like, here's where we're at in life and it's fine. And so that sounds like an amazing experience.
It was. I did have anxiety around some of my friends, just me doing this sudden K turn in life and
Yeah.
being like, Allison's straight. She dated this guy. She dated that guy, whatever. And then, wait, Allison's dating a woman? What?
So talk to me
Um,
about that. Did all your friends react okay or kindly? Or
Most of them did. And I had one friend that I honestly, it was my last term of my senior year. And I didn't see him all the time. And I just didn't tell him. He was a Turkish exchange student who he and I got along pretty well. I was also Wiccan at the time. And so it was funny. He'd yell across campus, "Hey, witch!" And it was just, okay. And that was my friend. We had this joking, positive relationship. But it was like, I was like, I don't know if I want to add the whole vibe on top of it. I don't know if he can handle all of this. But I'd been very active in the pagan community, which is actually how I met most of the LGBT folks I was friends with. And I didn't talk to him about that aspect of my life.
Oh,
We didn't see each other a whole lot. So it worked out. But most of my other friends, like my groups of friends, they knew and were, some of them were a little, wait, what? A little surprised, but they were pretty accepting. I had one friend who was raised relatively conservatively, and she was less comfortable around me and implied that I was somehow confusing friendship with
mm.
romantic feelings. But most everybody else was like, oh, okay. And did their best to roll with it. And we're happy to see her too. And I brought her into the things I was doing.
Oh, that's great. So
Yeah.
I want to know about how you were brought up. So were you brought up with like Wiccan background, or it sounds like you're
Definitely not a pagan background. My mom was originally Catholic
mm,
and ended up in an Episcopal church,
okay.
which is Catholic light, so to speak. Basically, the theological difference between Catholicism and the Episcopalian belief systems, pretty much transubstantiation, the idea that the host, Catholicism says the host, the wafer you eat, is actually Jesus. The Episcopal Church is no, it's symbolic. And that's the main difference. So it's a little less restrictive,
Okay.
but there's a lot of similarity. And
Okay.
so that was when I was raised. I was confirmed in that faith. And then a good friend of mine who had one parent who was an agnostic Jew and the other parent was a lapsed Catholic. She had done some digging into religion and started exploring Wicca, decided that was really the right path for me. So I just explored that path. So my family was nominally Episcopalian, and I pretty much got confirmed. And during that confirmation process, I was also studying Wicca. And after confirmation, I was like, within a couple of months, I'm like, so dad, I'm Wiccan, and I have no idea how to explain this to mom.
How old were you?
And that would be, it's like 16.
Oh, wow. So what got you into Wicca?
It was this nature spirituality.
Okay. I
I
love that.
I have that. I've always had like a scientific leaning and been very concerned about the environment. and just that image of worshiping nature and really connecting
Yeah.
with that was something I felt very strongly.
Oh, I love that.
So I started practicing. I'm still nominally pagan, but I haven't been active because it turns out the condition that I have, functional neurological disorder, my symptoms actually respond really strongly in a bad way to raising energy, which is a central part of a lot of pagan practices.
Oh, okay.
So it trying to actively practice became very frustrating and I backed off. So I still am philosophically pagan, but I'm not actively practicing at this point.
Okay. Yeah. And I love that about paganism is like that nature, because I believe in that. I always say I don't it's not that I don't believe in a God or anything like that. I still like God as universe, and that's just like
Mhm.
how I see it. And so when I see like nature, to me that's what that represents.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a strong pull. It's also one of the things, many things in my life that's just not standard. I've found that there's a lot of people within the pagan community who are also outside of community norms in other ways too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of LGBT pagans. There's a lot of polyamorous folks. There's a lot of people with all of these different, it's basically openness to breaking the social contract or creating new social contracts.
Yeah.
And so once you break through one of those walls, it's much easier to break through the other walls.
Yeah. I agree with that. I remember being I had a booth at a pagan like convention, and somebody there was like, I used to be in with the church and then I got into paganism, and I noticed that a lot of them are like into polyamory and they're like into these different things, and what's the connection? And I thought that was a weird question because I was like, I feel like when you start looking around, like you said, and breaking like these binary things and saying, I'm going to think outside the box, I'm not going to deal with this black or white thinking, it opens you up to a lot of different things.
Mhm.
And that's not necessarily meaning that everybody that is part of like LGBTQ plus community or that's like polyamorous is thinking the same way, but you're more likely to be open to different experiences. And I think that's a beautiful thing because I think that why we're here is to constantly explore ourselves and our understanding of ourselves in relation to the world and everything around us.
Absolutely. And I think that's part of why realizing I was bi wasn't such a big deal to me. I'd already broken through the religious barrier and decided, no, I'm exploring the paganism. I'm doing this. And so it was this, okay, I recognize that my mind and body are attracted to a woman. So why wouldn't I follow through on that? And, oh, that means I have a new label. Okay, cool. Rather than being like, oh my God, I can't be attracted to a woman. That's too much or anything like that. My
Yeah.
brain was, oh, okay. New data, new outcome. Okay.
Right.
So I was like, okay, my body and my subconscious are telling me I'm attracted to this woman. Let's roll with this and see where it goes.
Yeah. And from your experience, is there a vast difference between dating a female versus dating a male? Or do you just see the human and every human has their beautiful aspects and their not
It-
so beautiful aspects?
It's somewhere in between.
Okay.
Really, it's really about the person. Of course, like sex itself is physically different. The way sex happens can be different. But the love part, the emotional intensity, the emotional desire, that's the same. The love is the same. The wanting to share your life is the same. It's just safer when you fit heteronormative standards. Me walking down the street holding hands with my girlfriend could be a big deal depending on the neighborhood. And so there is a lot of it really is about a sense of safety, a sense of security. I've been in relationships where the woman I was involved with was afraid of pet names or snuggling, or the things that indicated relationship in front of her own father, even though he knew she was lesbian.
Yeah.
And stuff like that kind of eats away at you. And so it is much harder having a romantic partner who appears to be the same sex for that reason, because you're breaking the heteronormative standards, that social contract.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, it's very different. But as far as the feelings involved, no. Rhythms are a little different. Patterns are a little different. As a bi person, what I tend to find is whatever gender my partner is, I will find myself missing aspects of the other gender.
Okay.
But that's also something that's manageable, or something that, in our case, we actually are poly, so it doesn't matter. We can be with whoever else we want to be with
Yeah.
within our set of rules, which is another way of outside of the social contract. And as a disabled person, I'm also outside of the social contract because normative expectations don't apply to me, because I can't do all of the things that people assume I can do. And that's another situation where people have these expectations and assumptions because of what they see that just don't actually work in real life.
Yeah.
And there's so much of my life that what people see on the surface is not the reality that's going on underneath.
And I think that's such a great thing to remind people of, is that, yeah, you really don't know what's going on with somebody, whether we're talking about what's going on within their gender, pronoun, that aspect, or just what's going on in their life. Like if somebody appears that they can't do something or that they're having trouble with something, sometimes people have these, oh, just get over it or just do this. And that's not really understanding a person, and asking what's going on is so important.
Oh, absolutely. And very often we have what we call benevolent ableism, where people assume that they're helping, but what they're doing is actually excluding, like not asking the disabled person they work with about doing a task or being part of something because they assume they can't go.
Yes.
And it also happens in a somewhat different way within the LGBT community. Oh, they're gay. Do I really want to invite them to this event? Or is it appropriate to wish them a happy Mother's Day or a happy Father's Day because
Yeah.
they're trans? What do you do? And so there's a lot of questions people have that they're too afraid to ask. And so the default tends to be don't act. And that's not helpful for anybody. No matter
No.
what the difference is, it's not helpful to stay in your place of ignorance, when what you need to do is be ready to learn, reach out, and understand the next step.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel that if you're coming from a place of genuine curiosity and love, that it's okay to say, hey, I noticed today was Father's Day. Is it appropriate for me to wish you happy Father's Day? I thought of you, but I want to be respectful.
Absolutely. Or it could be something where you think about it ahead of time. I have a friend who transitioned, who she has a child and doesn't want to celebrate. And people try to wish her a happy Mother's Day. And she's like, I'm not my child's mom.
Mhm.
And then Father's Day comes around, and that was the role she had, but
Okay.
that's not how she identifies anymore. So very mixed feeling. But for her child, Father's Day is the day to celebrate. This year, their child just was like, it's your day, instead of saying Father's Day.
Oh, I love that.
And it was beautiful. And
Yeah.
so everybody has to come up with their own creative way of managing things. But once you know that somebody has that difference, you can ask about it and you can say, hey, it is Father's Day. How would you like me to acknowledge this day with you? Or isn't it wonderful to be a parent? And talk about it from that perspective. But ignoring it isn't going to do anybody any good.
Yeah.
Or pretending that everything's good isn't gonna. It's about ask the questions, get the information, do your research first if you can.
Yeah.
And another thing that's interesting is much of the English language has gendered so many terms that there's a lot of language that doesn't exist to handle people who are non-binary. And I actually have recently picked up the habit of referring to my sister's children as my nibblings.
Oh, cute. I love that.
It's because in English we have siblings,
Yeah.
but we don't have an equivalent word that's commonly used as a non-gendered term for your siblings' children. Nibblings has been the suggested alternative instead of nieces and nephews.
Yeah.
Nibblings, that's your non-gendered term for those people. And then along the same lines, also pibbling has been picked up, which is parents' sibling.
Oh, that was like pibbling.
Yes. Yeah.
That's sounds
And
what my puppy does when he has to go potty.
I don't know. I know. And but it fits with the sibling.
Yeah.
I'm my sister's pibbling. Now, do I need that as a cisgendered person? No, but it's good to recognize our vocabulary is inadequate and to think about and look for those alternative terms. If you have a trans person in your life, you can ask them what terms they prefer.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. It's not, if you have a non-binary person in your life, I shouldn't say trans, because a lot of trans people, they have transitioned to the other gender.
Yeah.
And so their pronouns are what they are. She, her, cool. You're now she for everything. He, him, cool. You're now he for everything. But there's a lot of people also who are non-binary. And so they're using they, them. There's been experiments with other terms like Zier and stuff like that, which aren't used as much, but still happen sometimes.
Okay. I was going to say, I've never heard of those.
It was something that was happening probably 10, 15 years ago. There was a lot more of that because they hadn't been as cemented in place as it is now.
Okay.
But
Oh,
basically,
so it was like a word for they instead of saying
right.
they. Okay.
Instead of saying they, or for somebody who was non-binary and somewhere in between,
Okay.
they didn't want to use she and they didn't want to use he.
Yeah.
So they went with X and Z
Oh, okay.
because there was still that sense of they being grammatically incorrect.
Got you.
And so now it seems like most people are using they as that third pronoun.
Yeah.
But there were experiments with other terms.
Wow. I love that you brought that up about really understanding what that person wants, because I think what we like to do as humans and just from generations of having this, like everything has to be in a category. So it's okay if you're a lesbian, then this is what that means. And if you're gay, this is what that means. And if you're trans, this is what that means. And this is what it should mean to you. And I think that it's so important, like you said, is to ask the person what they want or how they feel, because I think that's the whole idea of exploring yourself and understanding who you are as a person is you don't have to, just because, you like this thing or you feel like this gender doesn't mean that you still fit into the other boxes. Like you had mentioned your friend that transitioned from being the father figure to now being a her, but still wanting to celebrate Father's Day. And that's really important to understand, because it's okay for anybody, for all of us as humans, to fill out what it is that we want and how we want to show up and what we want to celebrate. And I think that when we finally just, instead of thinking, oh, I got this, this is what this person likes, and if they're categorized as this is how they feel and what I should say and who I should invite to these things, and just really understand that we're all just people. At the end of the day, we're all just these like spirits and this body moving around, figuring things out, and nothing is cemented, nothing set in stone. And you can't categorize a person.
No, you really can't. And with all the different hats I wear, different identities I have, for all of them, it's about what's really important to me.
Yeah.
What words best describe me and where I am at? What terms am I most comfortable with? How do I think of myself? And the disability community is wrestling with some similar issues in terms of what words best describe us. How do we talk about things? What language do we use? And it's the same thing. It's pick up your cues from the individual person.
Yep.
And ask them if you don't know. Oh, I'm going to talk about this. Are you disabled? Are you differently abled? What words do you like to describe your situation? Within the LGBT community, it's what pronouns do you use is an important piece so that no matter what their pronouns are, you're getting it right for them. And it's also something that evolves over time. Some people have a strong preference, other people don't. I had a partner who sometimes identified as she and sometimes as they. And I know of people who, I met this really lovely trans woman who still had all of her facial hair. And you accept who they are and how they define themselves. And that's what matters. Don't try to force them into a box. Ask what label they prefer. And I think that's the most vital part of all of this. There's been some people saying, don't assume people are straight. Think they're bi until proven otherwise. Because then you're less likely to reinforce the heteronormative standards we have.
Yeah.
I was very involved in a bi group for a long time, and that opened up my world to so many other aspects of identity and so many other alternative lifestyles, creative ways to look at life. And I think that's one of the most important things, that we as individuals be open to learning from the people around us and open to better understanding ourselves.
Yeah. And I think that's the key, is like really understanding yourself. I feel like people that are judging somebody else, they have a lot of judgments within themselves that they need to work through and work on. And so I think it's,
Absolutely. We're all much more critical of ourselves than we would be of other people we know, people we care about. And so if you've lived your life in a very regimented box, it's really hard to accept that other people don't. And so it really becomes this matter of recognizing within yourself what's going on so that you can be okay with who everybody else is.
yeah, I love that. That was beautifully said. So I want to dive into some questions. This has been such an amazing conversation, but how has the community played a role in your healing or self-expression? And what does it mean to find your people?
So for me, ideally, my people are queer, disabled folks. That's who I'm really looking for, is my people. But there's not going to be a group that's just that. So I have found queer spaces. I found disabled friendly spaces. And then I find the people who fit in both. Or I just find the people who share that one identity with me and enjoy that. So for me, after I came back to New Jersey after some traveling, after I graduated, I found By Request, which is a bisexual discussion group up in New York City. And that group was my lifeline for like over 15 years. And that was the space I went to meet new people, to connect, to learn, to build my social structure. And like I said, within that space, through the conversations that the group was having, I learned about so many things, from sex parties to the many ways that the bi community is pushed. Like basically, one of the easier ways to look at it is bi men and bi women are dealing with completely different phobias, but both cases, it's an uncomfortable situation. For bi men, because of the way our society works, the moment you do anything at all not straight, you get labeled as gay. It's less severe now than it used to be, but it's still there. So for bi men, a lot of them end up getting divorced the moment they recognize or act in any way on the fact that they have any kind of attraction to men, because their wives immediately go, "Oh, then you're gay. Why are we together?" And so that's the kind of thing a lot of bi men are dealing with, unless they identified as bi before getting into
The
relationship.
relationship.
And so there's a lot of that kind of phobia that bi men are dealing with. The moment you do anything not straight, you're written out of the heteronormative storyline and just you're gone. For women, we're hypersexualized because there's so much porn out there for men's consumption of lesbians, of women who are acting with both men and women. And so it's immediately that anything that moves stereotype, that like hypersexuality. And for both by men and by women, there's extra fears of cheating. All of a sudden, they've got twice as many reasons to cheat on you because obviously everybody's potentially partner, where before it was only half the population you were worried about. So that boils down to trust, because bi people aren't actually more likely to cheat. It's just there's potentially more people to be attracted to, but there's also a much larger percentage of people who are likely to reject you because you're part of the LGBT community or because you're not gay enough.
That's an interesting point that you brought up of people thinking like, oh, now you're going to cheat because you had this open, because I can see how somebody might think that, although I don't believe in that. I feel like if you're a person that cheats, you're probably going to cheat regardless of what you like. But that is interesting that humans, that's where our brains go. And I have heard people that are in a heterosexual relationship, they're like, oh, I don't care if my girlfriend likes another girl, that's sexy. And that's still cheating in my eyes. I'm like, what are you talking about?
No, exactly. But that's that hypersexualization I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Women being attracted to women is attractive to men.
Yeah.
Men being attracted to men is not attractive to most women. And that's a problem. So for the bi community, bi men and bi women are both struggling, but there's different reasons and different stereotypes behind each side of that struggle.
That's such an interesting point. I never even thought of that.
And on the LGBT side, there's a lot of anytime you could pick a partner of the other gender and then you can pass as heterosexual. So are you really going to stay with me when things get tough? Are you really going to be there? Are you really worth dating? Because you could leave and make your life easier. And so that's part of the storyline that goes along within the queer community. And a lot of trans people have this additional connection to the bi community. Many trans people are bi, not all. You can't say all of anything. Right. But even if they're not, their attraction has shifted, whether they've gone from being attracted to women to men, or very simply, their gender identity has changed. So now they're either within heteronormative standards or they're now suddenly outside of them.
Yeah.
So a trans man might be attracted to women the whole time, but when he was thought of by other people to be female, it was lesbian. But then he transitioned and now he's fitting the heteronormative expectations a little more if they accept him as male, which they don't always do for trans folks. So it makes things more complicated. But I've had multiple times, we've had trans folks join bisexual groups and bisexual discussions for those kinds of reasons, to hear from the perspective of people whose whole life has been having to code switch between straight community and gay community.
That's interesting. What's a stereotype about the LGBTQ plus community that you find most frustrating or untrue? And how do you personally break that mold?
So it goes back to the stories about bi people and what we've been talking about. All of these presumptions of passing straight, of not being gay enough, of all of these ways that even within the LGBT community, the bi community is still marginalized in a way that just doesn't happen to people who identify as lesbian or gay. It's likely that there's actually more bi people out there than gay or straight. If you think about it as life's a bell curve.
Right.
On one side, you have 100% same-sex attraction. On the other side, you have 100% opposite sex attraction, using that loosely. Bi people are going to be the peak of the hump.
Yeah.
Why isn't everybody about being bi? The stuff we were talking about before. As a person who has attraction to both people, unless you're also poly, you're not going to be walking down the street proving
Right.
you are. You're going to be seen with your current partner who's either in gender or different gender. And people make their assumptions.
Yeah.
And also, because of all of that, people who are predominantly attracted to the same gender tend to just pass themselves off as gay. And people who tend to be attracted to a different gender tend to just pass themselves off or identify as straight. And it's the people who are somewhere in that like 50-50 range or who are really open-minded, who are willing to openly, actively identify as bi. But again, we constantly have to remind people
Right.
that we are. And so my thing is, that's what we have to do. The more we can shift people's mindsets to recognize that bisexuality isn't a phase and isn't a like identity of convenience and isn't part of the process of being gay, the better our society is. We need to recognize all of these gray areas in life and that people don't fit into boxes all that neatly. So as a bi person, I'm like, hey, hi, I exist.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily look like the typical thing you think of when you say LGBT, but that doesn't make me any less a part of the community. And like even in the LGBT settings, bi people often just code switch to gay. And we're over 50% of the people in attendance in most LGBT events. And so nobody knows what a bi person looks like because they're too busy trying to decide if we're straight or gay.
I love this conversation and it's so perfect for don't judge a book by its cover. There's the gray areas. Everybody's unique. And this is just, it's awesome. But if there's somebody out there that's listening, that's questioning their identity, or maybe they're confused by their feelings, like when you first had yours and you were like, oh, I'm feeling all these things the blushing and whatever. What would you say to them?
I would say, trust yourself. Believe in yourself. If you have feelings or relationship type feelings, sexual type feelings, an emotional draw, you owe it to yourself to explore that, at least within your head. Give yourself the mental space to really think about how you're feeling, to really recognize what's going on, and then make the decision if, when, and how you might act on it. But if you're having feelings, if you are confused, then there's probably a reason. And you deserve to explore that and find the reason and to celebrate your uniqueness.
That's a gem right there. I love that. That was perfect. What are genuine ways that people can support the LGBTQ community at work and families or in public spaces beyond just saying, I'm an ally?
Okay. So, yeah, saying you're an ally is nowhere near enough. One of the things is making a point of using your pronouns and put them in your email, put them in any public facing thing that you are doing. Use your pronouns and say what your pronouns are. This really helps normalize things, and it signals to trans people that you're more likely to be able to accept who they are. Another thing is think about your words and word choices when it comes to gender identity, attraction, all of that. If you watch shows that have LGBT characters in it, you can get a better sense. That may not be the absolute reality, but it gives you a glimpse into the culture. It normalizes things for you. As an example, there was a really beautiful episode of a show you would not expect it to go that way, The Last of Us. And one of the episodes was all about a same-sex couple who found each other during the apocalypse. And they had both been so repressed prior to the apocalypse. They never admitted that they had same-sex attraction. And you watch them over the course of an episode fall in love, live and age together, and die together. And there are a lot of people up in arms because they're like, this is a zombie. What's going on? But it was a beautifully done set of images and a story. It was a love story. And it was a beautiful love story of two men who, despite their discomforts, recognized each other and fell in love. And so watching something like that and recognizing the context can help you get past some of that fear and anxiety that might be there. So it's be aware, look for those things, watch them, support them, because there are going to be people denouncing them and hating on them. So you know they exist. So the more aware you can be in that sense, it helps. Also, recognize that it's not just people who use she, her who can get pregnant. Recognize that someone who uses she, her may have been the person who contributed sperm to a child.
Yeah.
Recognize those kinds of things are possible. They may not be common, but they are possible. And adjust your word choice. Pregnant person, not pregnant women. Little things like that are another aspect of taking that time to recognize. And it can be performative if you do that, but don't think about what that means.
Yeah.
But it's about take the time to think about it. Why is this important? This is important because we don't want to deny the masculinity of this male person who is pregnant. We don't want him to have to suffer further indignities and more aggression, more microaggressions than he's already experiencing with the dysmorphia that comes with I'm having a baby, but I'm a man. Acknowledge that this is the reality that some people experience, and try to have forms, paperwork, ID, all of the things involved, not assume. And it's really this, don't assume that just because you see a man and a woman walk down the street, that they're heterosexual. Don't assume that if you can't determine someone's gender, that's a bad thing. They may be in transition. They may intentionally be putting themselves in an androgynous space because they don't identify with either gender. There's all kinds of things going on. And the more you open your eyes to it, the more you open your heart and mind to recognizing they're just people too. The dehumanization that we're dealing with right now as a society, as a culture, it's huge. And the trans population is getting scapegoated the most. And so they need as much extra protection as we can possibly give. And the thing of it is, like the poem says, you don't stand up for people, there's going to be no one left to stand up for you. And the thing I see going around a lot now is, don't forget, Pride started as a riot, and it has become a celebration. But right now, those rights that we fought so hard for are under attack, just like the rights of the disability community, Black community. All the minority identities right now are under attack. And so the more you support protecting people with minority identities, the better off you are. The other things that really prove allyship is knowing what the issues are and voting to protect those rights. Vote so that all members of the LGBT community are protected. Vote so that people's civil rights continue.
Yeah.
Make those decisions. And when you're thinking about whether or not to vote, where to vote, how to interact with your office, your board, your school, make sure that everything you're doing is being inclusive, not excluding. Don't just go for heteronormative standards. Open your mind and go, right, just because that's typical doesn't mean the other possibilities are bad. There's nothing wrong with the kid having two mothers or two fathers or other things. Support that, recognize it, celebrate it. Don't try to hide or suppress it or give someone a hard time about it. And so allyship is that. Be protective. Don't tone police, but be protective. And move towards us all being on the same level and us all being safe.
Yes, I love that. Everybody needs to feel safe, heard, and you don't have to always understand, but just being there to have an open mind and knowing like we're all human.
Absolutely.
So I always ask this at the end of my podcast, but because this is a special topic, what does Unleash and Align mean to you, especially in the context of your identity and your journey this Pride Month?
So I'm all about, right now, it's so much about unleashing my protective mama bear type instinct. I want us all to be safe. I want us all to be happy. So I'm protesting. I'm going out. I'm holding up signs. I'm participating in Pride. This year, so much more has been safe Pride instead of happy Pride. Years in the past, everybody's wishing each other a happy Pride. This year, it's have a safe Pride because we know what we're facing.
Yeah.
So my instinct is to make sure I'm safe. But whenever I have the energy, stand up for our rights, protect us being all the minority identities in all honesty, because they're all interrelated. Anything that seeks to make some part of our community less human is going to make it easier to make the rest of the community less human. So I think it's coalition building, it's co-support, it's that connecting and building. And so my thing is protect, spread the news, try to keep people safe. I know I have a lot of passing privilege. I want to use that the best I can to help the people who don't have that passing privilege.
Alison, it's been so amazing to talk to you. It's such a great conversation. You've got to come back on, and I'll link all the things to all your amazing stuff below, and everybody needs to go check out your book. But it's been such a pleasure, and I can't wait to have you back on.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this podcast, please make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review so that we can connect with more people to develop our mind, body, and spirit.